Confederate Family Insurance for over 100 years, protecting a people and their property.
The American Civil War is a very popular subject in alternate histories because the possibilities of it turning out differently are so numerous. What lasting effects would the Southern victory have even to this day? It's even the central focus of probably the biggest and most involved alternate history work, the Timeline 191 series by Harry Turtledove. Personally, I thought it started out great but really petered out when Turtledove started going further and further out of his way to make World War II identical to the real version except for the names. But that's not what I'm here to discuss. For this roundtable, I've taken on CSA, the Confederate States of America, a 2004 independent film that purports to be a British documentary on the history of America since the Civil War that's airing on Confederate television for the first time. This is a brilliant idea as it lends a good touch of verisimilitude and allows for numerous commercial breaks where we see the kind of advertising that would be present in a modern America where slavery still existed. My favorite is their take on cops.
Run, boy, the battery will get you. Run, boy, run, it's almost day. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What you gonna do when we find you?
It has to be said that by the usual alternate history standards, the film is a failure. For starters, it has an unusually vague point of divergence where Judah P. Benjamin succeeds in getting Britain and France to support the Confederates, but no specifics on how this allowed them to win the war. From there, the South takes over all of America, which the real Confederates never wanted to do. They just wanted to break apart and make their own country. And finally, they invade South America, creating the largest empire in human history. That part is actually based on the real plans of Confederate leaders, but it's completely ignored what an enormous socio-economic undertaking this would be. Well, at least in this case, none of that really matters, because Kevin Willmott, the writer and director, did not intend for this to be a plausible alternate history. There's a concept called the death of the author, which says that it doesn't matter what an artist intended for their work to be, it only matters what the audience takes away from it. And I've never believed this myself, because even if you think an artistic work doesn't represent what the author wanted, you can always just say he did a bad job. And in this case, Willmott intended to make a statement about racism in America today, and how it's not as far removed from the attitudes of the past as we might believe. And in this, it does a very good job. The ending is an analysis of the real-life inspirations for various parts of the film, and it's especially shocking just how many of those products in the commercials were real. This sequence also ends on a very powerful note that I won't dare spoil, but certainly makes its point in a way that the likes of Spike Lee, who served as executive producer, could learn a few things from. The documentary format also nicely remedies one common criticism of the film, that the Confederates are obsessed with slavery to the exclusion of all else. The film is supposedly made by Brits who are against slavery, so of course they promote that view. Given everything I've said until now, it might surprise you to learn that the film is primarily a comedy. It opens with a quote from George Bernard Shaw that if you're going to tell people the truth, you better also make them laugh. And while I didn't really laugh all that much, that lighthearted tone does nicely get us through what could be a very preachy movie. It mostly comes in with the commercials, but there are also great parallels to real history that don't make the usual Harry Turtledove mistakes of going way too far just for the sake of the parallel. For instance, we learn that the Confederates have demanded slavery reparations, by which they mean that the Canadian government should pay them back for all the slaves that escaped there. There's also an out-of-nowhere nod to the Monica Lewinsky scandal that I'll leave you to discover yourself. There's not much to talk about in regards to the film's acting, which is mostly just talking head interviews or deliberately bad acting in Confederate movies and shows, but I do have to acknowledge the terrific performance by Larry Peterson as the closest thing the film has to a main character, Senator John Fauntleroy V. It can't have been easy to play a guy who always keeps up a slick, charismatic facade while spouting the most hateful nonsense imaginable, but he does it like a pro, making the few moments where he lets his guard down all the more powerful. This is a film that's really hard for me to sum up. It's a comedy that I didn't laugh at much, and a very implausible alternate history, and yet it stays with me because it makes its points well, and it doesn't wear out its welcome at just 89 minutes despite the 150 years it has to cover. This is definitely one that's worth checking out.